Thomas Reed stood at the frost-covered windows of Starlight Lodge, watching the blizzard rage across the Rocky Mountains. The former military pilot had chosen this remote location for its solitude, transforming an abandoned ski resort into a sanctuary for those seeking escape from the world below. Tonight, however, something felt different in the howling wind. The lodge's advanced security system, a remnant of his cautious military days, pinged softly. Movement at the perimeter. Thomas frowned, checking the holographic display. In this weather, no one should be foolish enough to venture up the mountain. The thermal imaging showed a humanoid figure stumbling through the snow, their heat signature fluctuating dangerously. "You're getting soft, Reed," he muttered, already pulling on his winter gear. The figure collapsed just as he reached the main entrance, and Thomas pushed through the cutting wind, snow crunching beneath his boots. The woman lay face down in the snow, wearing what appeared to be a sleek environmental suit of unknown design. As he turned her over, his breath caught in his throat. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality, like mother of pearl, and delicate markings traced the edges of her face like crystalline frost patterns. Despite her alien appearance, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her features. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that shifted color like the aurora borealis. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "They mustn't find me." Thomas didn't hesitate. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something in her eyes spoke of genuine fear. He lifted her easily, noting how the environmental suit seemed to adjust its temperature in response to his touch. Definitely not human technology. Inside the lodge, he laid her on the couch near the fireplace. The woman's breathing steadied as warmth returned to her limbs. Thomas noticed that her suit was damaged, revealing what looked like a ceremonial garment underneath. "I'm Thomas Reed," he said, keeping his voice calm and neutral. "You're safe here." She studied him with those mesmerizing eyes. "I am Lyra," she replied carefully, then added with a slight hesitation, "of the Stellar Concordat." Thomas's military training kicked in. The Stellar Concordat, an advanced civilization that had made first contact with Earth 5 years ago. Relations were peaceful but distant, with strict protocols governing any interaction. Having a Concordat member in his lodge violated at least a dozen interstellar treaties. "You're a long way from the embassy," he observed, pouring her a cup of hot tea. Earth beverages were supposedly safe for Concordat physiology. Lyra accepted the cup, her fingers brushing his. A slight electric tingle passed between them. "The embassy is compromised. I had no choice but to flee." She took a sip, her eyes widening in surprise at the taste. "This is pleasant. Earl Grey. Old Earth remedy for troubled times." Thomas settled into a nearby chair, noting how the firelight played across her iridescent skin. "Want to tell me who's after you?" "My own people. Or rather, a faction within the Concordat who would use me to trigger a war with Earth." Lyra's voice carried a weight of responsibility that seemed at odds with her youthful appearance. Was, to be married to Commander Vex of the military caste. The marriage would give his faction control over Concordat policy toward Earth. Thomas leaned forward. "And you disagree with their policy?" "They believe humanity is a threat that must be contained or eliminated. I believe there is more connecting our species than either side realizes." She met his gaze steadily. "My grandmother told me stories of ancient times when our peoples were one. Stories forbidden by the military caste." The security system pinged again. Multiple contacts this time, approaching from above. Thomas moved to the window, his experienced eye picking out the sleek shapes of Concordat shuttles descending through the storm. "They're here," Lyra whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Thomas checked his old military neural implant. Still connected to Earth's defense grid, still showing him things he technically shouldn't be able to see. The Concordat ships were running dark, no official transponders. This wasn't a sanctioned mission. I have a hidden hangar under the lodge, he said, already moving toward a concealed panel. And a ship they won't be expecting. Lyra stood, her movements graceful despite her exhaustion. Why would you help me? You know nothing about me. Thomas paused, considering. The smart move would be to turn her over, avoid an interstellar incident. But something in her story rang true, echoing his own experiences with military hardliners who'd rather fight than understand. Let's just say I've seen enough war to know when someone's trying to start one. He opened the hidden passage. Besides, my grandmother used to tell stories too. About stars falling from the sky, bringing people who looked like living moonlight. A ghost of a smile crossed Lyra's face as she followed him into the passage. Above them, the first Concordat ships touched down, their weapons charging. Thomas felt the familiar pre-battle calm settle over him, along with something new, a certainty that helping this woman was somehow right, even if it defied all logic. The ancient stories were about to collide with reality, and Thomas Reed, the lonely lodge keeper, was about to become either a hero or a traitor to his entire species. Possibly both. The underground hangar hummed with ancient power as Thomas activated systems that hadn't been used in years. His ship, the Starcross, was an experimental hybrid of human and salvaged alien tech from his final military mission, one that wasn't supposed to exist. Is that Concordat engineering? Lyra asked, running her fingers along the ship's crystalline sensor array. Recovered from a crash site in the Kuiper Belt, Thomas replied, initiating the startup sequence. The brass wanted it destroyed. I had other ideas. The ship's hull shifted color, adapting to the ambient lighting, a chameleon system that had taken him years to understand. The ceiling above them shuddered as Concordat troops landed on the lodge's roof. Thomas watched Lyra's expression tighten at the sound of her people's weapons charging. Your commander Vex doesn't waste time. He's not. Lyra started, then stopped herself. Her iridescent skin flickered with emotion. The marriage arrangement wasn't his idea. Someone else pulls the strings, the same ones who've been pushing for war with Earth. The hangar's sensors picked up energy signatures from above, they were preparing to breach. Thomas guided Lyra into the Starcross's cockpit, noting how she instantly recognized the hybrid controls. You know how to fly? All Concordat nobility are trained in stellar navigation, she replied, already bringing up the neural interface displays. Though I've never seen a system quite like this. Thomas smiled despite the tension. That makes two of us. Half the time I think she flies herself. The cockpit sealed just as explosive charges detonated above them. Through the hangar's sensors, he watched elite Concordat hunters rappel down on energy tethers. They're using Mark 7 neural trackers, Lyra observed, her fingers dancing across the crystalline interface. Standard protocol for royal pursuit. But something's wrong, these readings don't match official Concordat frequencies. Thomas engaged the Starcross's engines, feeling the familiar merge with the ship's hybrid consciousness. Meaning? These aren't regular military forces. They're using band technology, neural scramblers, consciousness suppressors. Her voice shook slightly. They're not here to capture me. They're here to erase me. The hangar doors opened to reveal the raging blizzard outside. Thomas pushed the throttle forward, and the Starcross responded like a living thing, launching them into the storm. Behind them, energy beams sliced through the falling snow. They're good, Thomas muttered, weaving through the mountain peaks. But they don't know these mountains like I do. He dropped into a narrow canyon, skimming mere meters above a frozen river. Lyra's hands moved in perfect sync with his across the controls, their neural patterns harmonizing through the ship's interface. The Starcross, she said suddenly. The name, it's from an ancient Concordat myth about star-crossed lovers from different worlds who defied the gods themselves. Would you believe it came to me in a dream? Thomas banked hard around a cliff face, losing 2 pursuit craft in the maneuver. After I first integrated the Concordat tech, I started having these dreams, memories that didn't feel like my own. Genetic memory, Lyra whispered. It's supposed to be impossible between our species, but... She froze, staring at a data stream. Thomas, these pursuit ships, they're running on quantum signatures that haven't been used since the Great Severance. The what? A period in our history, over 10,000 years ago, when our people supposedly split from. She was cut off as a massive energy pulse rocked the ship. Warning signals flared across the neural interface. Thomas diverted power to the shields, his mind racing. We need somewhere to hide, make repairs. I know a place, but... He hesitated. It's classified. Off every grid. You can trust me, Lyra said softly, placing her hand over his on the controls. That electric tingle passed between them again, stronger this time. Through the neural interface, Thomas caught fragments of her emotions, fear mixed with hope, and something deeper, a recognition that defied explanation. He made his decision. There's an abandoned research facility in the coast mountains. Project Starbridge, a joint military-scientific effort to understand artifacts found in the Arctic ice. Artifacts that looked suspiciously like Concordat technology, but carbon-dated to before human civilization. Lyra's eyes widened. The missing link, she breathed. The proof that could prevent this war. She quickly interfaced with the ship's quantum arrays, masking their signature. But we'll have to survive long enough to reach it. Above them, more pursuit ships pierced the storm clouds, their weapons charging. Thomas felt the Starcross respond to their combined neural input, moving like an extension of their shared consciousness. Whatever connection existed between their species, it was more than theory now, it was flowing through the ship's hybrid systems, growing stronger with each passing moment. Hold on, he warned, plotting an impossible course through a maze of canyons. This is either going to be brilliant or spectacularly fatal. The Starcross dove, and the night erupted into chaos of snow, energy beams, and quantum fire. Behind them, the hunters of the Concordat pursued with relentless determination, unaware that their quarry was about to uncover secrets that would shake both civilizations to their core. And in the cockpit of an impossible ship, a human and a being of living starlight found their destinies increasingly, inexplicably intertwined. The abandoned research facility emerged from the snowstorm like a ghost ship, its massive structure half buried in the mountainside. Thomas landed the Starcross in a concealed hangar, the ship's hybrid systems interfacing smoothly with the dormant facility grid. Project Starbridge, Thomas explained as they moved through darkened corridors. Officially shut down 15 years ago after a supposed containment breach. Unofficially. He placed his hand on a scanner, and ancient systems hummed to life. Some of us never stopped asking questions. The main laboratory sprawled before them, filled with artifacts that made Lyra gasp. Crystalline structures identical to Concordat technology stood alongside human attempts to reverse engineer them. But it was the central chamber that drew their attention, a massive DNA helix hologram rotating slowly, showing 2 intertwined genetic codes. Impossible, Lyra whispered, her iridescent skin pulsing with emotion as she studied the display. This shows human and Concordat DNA sharing a common ancestor. But our records state that we evolved separately, galaxies apart. Thomas accessed the main computer, bringing up classified files. Project Starbridge's real mission was to understand these artifacts and the genetic samples found with them. They discovered that humans and the Concordat people were artificially separated, your population taken to another galaxy while we remained on Earth. The Great Severance, Lyra breathed. Our forbidden histories speak of a time when our people lived among the stars as one. But why? Why separate us? Before Thomas could respond, the facility's sensors pinged. Multiple ships entering the atmosphere, he reported grimly. They're tracking us through something in your environmental suit. Lyra quickly removed the damaged suit, revealing the elegant ceremonial garments beneath. The suit's neural interface sparked and died. A quantum tracker. They've been following my suit's signature, not me. She looked up at Thomas. They'll still find us eventually. Then we better work fast. Thomas brought up more classified files. The project discovered that both our species were part of an ancient civilization called the Stellar Assembly. They seeded multiple galaxies with life, creating variations of their own genetic code. But something went wrong, Lyra continued, her scientific training letting her quickly grasp the data. A divide in their philosophy of expansion. One group wanted to spread through the galaxies peacefully, the other sought to conquer. Thomas nodded. Rather than fight a civil war that could destroy everything, they separated their population. The peaceful faction became the Concordat, sent to another galaxy. The warriors remained on Earth, becoming human ancestors. But that makes no sense, Lyra protested. The Concordat military caste are the ones pushing for war now, while many humans seek peace. Because it wasn't that simple. Thomas brought up genetic analyses. Both populations retained both aspects, the capacity for peace and war, creation and destruction. What makes us unique is how we balance them. Lyra's hands traced the DNA helix hologram. And I carry both genetic lines in near-perfect balance. That's why they want to stop this marriage alliance. Not because it would start a war. But because it would prove we're the same people, Thomas finished. Making war between us impossible to justify. He watched as she absorbed this truth, her otherworldly beauty somehow more striking in the hologram's light. My grandmother knew, she said softly. She told me to seek the dreams, to trust what I felt when I encountered humans. The resonance, the recognition. She met Thomas's gaze. Like what I felt when you found me in the snow. The facility shuddered as explosion lit up the night sky. The hunters had found them. Thomas quickly began transferring the project data to secure storage. They can't stop this truth from coming out. Both our peoples need to know. The Quantum Assembly, Lyra said suddenly. The Concordat's annual gathering of all noble houses. It's in 3 days. Every major family will be there, including those pushing for war. If we could broadcast this evidence through the quantum network. They'd have to acknowledge it, Thomas agreed. But getting into the most heavily guarded event in Concordat space? That's a suicide mission. Lyra's expression hardened with royal determination. Not with help. There are others in the Concordat who suspect the truth, who work in secret to prevent war. My handmaiden, Seline, leads a resistance movement. She can get us inside. Another explosion rocked the facility. Through the neural link he still shared with the Starcross, Thomas felt the ship's systems adapting, preparing for battle. Your people are remarkably persistent, he observed. Our people, Lyra corrected, a slight smile playing across her luminescent features. She reached for his hand, and that now familiar electric connection sparked between them. The question is, Thomas Reed, are you ready to help me rewrite the history of 2 civilizations? Thomas intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling their shared genetic heritage sing through the contact. I started breaking rules the day I saved that crashed Concordat ship. Might as well see it through. The facility's defenses engaged as elite hunters breached the outer perimeter. But this time, Thomas and Lyra faced them with new purpose, defending not just their lives but a truth that could transform both their worlds. In the crystalline laboratory, surrounded by evidence of their shared past, a former military pilot and an alien princess prepared to change the future, together. The Starcross streaked through the upper atmosphere, its hybrid systems pushing past design limits. In the cockpit, Thomas and Lyra worked in perfect synchronization, their neural patterns harmonizing through the ship's interface. Behind them, the research facility collapsed under sustained bombardment, but the vital data was safe in their possession. Approaching the rendezvous coordinates, Thomas announced, checking the quantum signatures Lyra had provided. They were headed to a secret base hidden in an asteroid belt, the headquarters of the resistance movement led by Lyra's former handmaiden. Seline will help us, Lyra assured him, though tension lined her ethereal features. She's been gathering evidence of the conspiracy for years. But Thomas. She hesitated. The resistance includes both humans and Concordat members. Some of them might be difficult to convince. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, a perfect hiding place. Thomas skillfully wove through the debris field, following a series of encrypted beacons. I'm used to difficult people. Spent enough time with special operations. Speaking of which. Lyra's hands danced across the crystalline controls. We're being hailed. Old Earth military frequency. A familiar voice crackled through the comm system. You've got some explaining to do, Reed. Thomas grinned. Captain Roland. Still running that off-books task force of yours? Someone has to keep an eye on the shadows between worlds. Roland's gruff voice carried a hint of amusement. Like watching my best pilot steal classified tech and harbor alien royalty. Your signal matches some interesting chatter we've been picking up. It's bigger than we thought, Captain. Thomas shared a look with Lyra. Much bigger. We need to talk. A hidden hangar materialized within one of the larger asteroids, its entrance masked by holographic technology that blended both human and Concordat design. As they landed, Thomas saw other ships, a mix of Earth military craft and sleek Concordat vessels, all modified to avoid detection. The hangar's main chamber was a hub of activity. Humans and Concordat members worked side by side at various stations, monitoring communications and coordinating operations. At the center stood two figures, Captain Roland, a weathered veteran with cybernetic enhancements visible along his temples, and a tall Concordat woman with silver-white skin who could only be Seline. My princess, Seline bowed slightly, her formal manner at odds with the practical combat gear she wore. When I helped you escape the arranged marriage, I never imagined. She gestured to the activity around them. This is what we've been working toward. Proof that cooperation is possible. More than possible, Lyra replied, producing the data crystal from the research facility. Necessary. We're the same people, Seline. We always have been. As the evidence was displayed, the chamber fell silent. Humans and Concordat alike stared at the genetic analysis, the ancient artifacts, the undeniable proof of their shared heritage. Captain Roland let out a low whistle. This changes everything, he said. And nothing. The hardliners on both sides will try to bury this, maybe even use it to justify their fears. Ancient enemy makes a good propaganda piece. Then we don't give them the chance. Thomas stepped forward. The quantum assembly is in 2 days. Every major player will be there, and the quantum network reaches every corner of both civilizations. A simultaneous broadcast, Seline caught on quickly. But the security is designed to keep enemies out, Lyra finished. Not someone who knows every protocol, every secret passage from growing up in the assembly halls. She turned to Thomas. And not someone with experimental hybrid technology that bridges both our engineering principles. Roland studied the Starcross thoughtfully. You'll need a distraction. Something big enough to keep security focused elsewhere, but not so big it risks civilian lives. I have an idea about that, a new voice joined them. A young human woman with an array of neural interfaces stepped forward. Dr. Naomi Chen, Quantum Mechanics. The assembly's defensive grid has a fascinating weakness. It was designed to detect and repel either human or Concordat signatures, never both simultaneously. The Starcross can exploit that, Thomas realized. Create a cascade of false signals, make them think they're under attack from all sides. While we slip through their blind spot, Lyra nodded. But we'll need a team. People who can move between both worlds. Over the next hours, a plan took shape. Roland's Special Operations veterans would coordinate with Seline's resistance fighters. Dr. Chen and her team would handle the quantum network broadcast. And at the center of it all, the Starcross would carry Thomas and Lyra into the heart of the assembly. As the others finalized details, Thomas found Lyra standing alone, watching a holographic display of their two galaxies slowly spinning. Having second thoughts, he asked softly. No, she turned to face him, her iridescent skin reflecting the starlight. But I am afraid. Not of failing, but of succeeding. This truth will shake both our worlds to their foundations. What if we're not ready? Thomas took her hand, feeling that familiar resonance between them grow stronger. Maybe that's why the original stellar assembly separated us. Not just to prevent a war, but to let us grow, develop differently, until we were ready to come together again. Ready to be better than they were. Lyra's free hand traced the scar on his temple, an old combat wound that lined up perfectly with Concordat royal markings. And are we ready? Look around, Thomas gestured to the humans and Concordat working together in the chamber. We already are. We just need to show everyone else it's possible. The final preparations continued around them as the Starcross's systems hummed with anticipation. In less than 48 hours, they would attempt the impossible, infiltrating the most secure facility in Concordat space to broadcast a truth that would forever change two civilizations. But in that moment, as human and Concordat technology worked in harmony and ancient genetic memory stirred in their joined hands, tomorrow's dangers seemed distant against the weight of destiny finally fulfilled. The Quantum Assembly Palace floated in high orbit above the Concordat homeworld, its crystalline spires reflecting starlight like a crown of diamonds. Through the Starcross's viewport, Thomas watched squadrons of defensive ships patrol complex patterns around the structure. Neural interfaces active, Lyra reported, her hands steady on the hybrid controls despite the tension in her voice. Dr. Chen's quantum spoofing program is ready. Thomas nodded, feeling the ship's systems align with their combined consciousness. The past 2 days had been a blur of preparation, the resistance teams moving into position across both human and Concordat space. Everything hinged on the next few hours. Incoming transmission, he announced as the comm system activated. Right on schedule. Commander Vex's image appeared on the quantum display, his aristocratic features twisted with concern. Princess Lyra, thank the stars. Everyone believes you were kidnapped by human terrorists. Return now, and we can prevent this situation from escalating into war. Still playing your part, Vex? Lyra's voice was cold. How long have you known the truth about our people? How many others in the military caste helped suppress it? The commander's facade cracked slightly. The truth? That we're descended from cowards who fled rather than fight? That humans carry the warrior bloodline we should have inherited? The Concordat must remain pure, must grow stronger. By starting a war that would devastate both our civilizations? Thomas cut in. That's not strength. That's fear. Vex's eyes narrowed. The human speaks boldly for someone about to be atomized. All ships, target that vessel. The princess must be recovered at any cost. The connection cut as defensive ships moved to surround them. Thomas felt the Starcross respond to their shared neural input, combat systems engaging. Dr. Chen, now would be good. The quantum network erupted with false signals. Hundreds of phantom ships appeared on the defensive grid, human destroyers, Concordat cruisers, merchant vessels and military craft, all seemingly converging on the assembly. Security forces scattered in confusion, unable to distinguish real threats from false ones. They're reacting exactly as predicted, Lyra observed as they slipped through the chaos. The grid was never designed to handle both human and concordat signatures simultaneously. The Starcross's hybrid nature made it nearly invisible among the phantom signals. They docked at a maintenance airlock that Lyra's royal code still accessed, slipping aboard the assembly station just as the first warning sirens began to blare. Inside, the crystalline corridors were a maze of panic and confusion. Noble houses from across Concordat space rushed to their emergency shelters while security forces charged in multiple directions, chasing phantom threats. Thomas and Lyra moved quickly through secret passages known only to the royal family, making their way to the central broadcast hub. Stop! A squad of elite guards appeared ahead, weapons raised. Their leader's eyes widened in recognition. Princess? Stand aside, Raven Squad, Lyra commanded, her royal authority ringing through the corridor. You swore an oath to protect the Concordat. What we carry will save our people from a devastating war. The squad leader hesitated, neural implants flickering as he processed tactical data. The human, he's generating both Concordat and Earth signatures. That's impossible unless... He lowered his weapon. The ancient prophecies. They spoke of a rejoining. Not prophecies, Thomas corrected. Memories. Genetic memories of who we used to be. Who we can be again. More security forces were closing in, but the squad moved to defend the corridor. Go, their leader urged. We'll hold them here. Save our people, all our people. The central broadcast hub was surprisingly empty, everyone had fled to the shelters. Lyra moved to the quantum interface while Thomas sealed the doors. Through their neural link, he felt the Starcross engaging phantom ships to keep the defensive fleet occupied outside. The network is ready, Lyra announced, her fingers dancing across crystalline controls. But Vex locked out my royal access codes. Good thing we brought a hybrid solution. Thomas connected the Starcross's neural interface to the broadcast system. The ship's unique quantum signature, neither fully human nor concordat, sliced through the security lockouts. Alarms blared as the doors began to buckle under heavy weapons fire. They had minutes at most. Lyra activated the quantum network as Thomas uploaded the research facility's data. Across 2 galaxies, every quantum-capable device began receiving the transmission. This is Princess Lyra of the Stellar Concordat, she began, her voice carrying to billions. What you are about to see is the truth about our peoples, a truth some have died to protect, and others have killed to suppress. The evidence played across the quantum network, genetic analysis, ancient artifacts, historical records. The story of one people artificially separated, their shared heritage denied. As the truth spread, weapons fire at the door stopped. Through security feeds, they watched humans and Concordat members across the station lowering their weapons, staring at the revelations in shock. We stand at a crossroads, Lyra continued. We can continue down the path of fear and separation, or we can remember who we truly are. Not enemies. Not even allies. Family, divided by time but united by blood. Commander Vex's forces finally breached the door, but they found themselves facing not just Thomas and Lyra, but their own squad members who had seen the truth. The commander himself stared at the genetic evidence displayed across every screen, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling. It's over, Vex, Thomas said quietly. The truth has a way of surviving, no matter how deep you try to bury it. The aftermath came swiftly. Across both civilizations, people emerged from shelters and homes to find their worlds forever changed. The revelation of their shared heritage made war impossible, replacing fear with curiosity about their lost connection. Ancient traditions were re-examined, historical accounts rewritten. Weeks later, Thomas stood with Lyra on the observation deck of the assembly station, watching ships from Earth and the Concordat freely mingling in space. The Starcross floated nearby, its hybrid systems now being studied as a blueprint for future cooperation. The Genetic Council wants to study us, Lyra mentioned, her iridescent skin glowing softly in the starlight. Apparently our neural compatibility is unprecedented. They think the Starcross's systems only worked because we both carry particularly strong markers of the original stellar assembly DNA. Scientific proof of what we already knew. Thomas turned to face her, taking her hands in his. That familiar electric connection sparked between them, stronger than ever. We were meant to find each other. To remember. Lyra smiled, her color-shifting eyes meeting his. To remind everyone else. The military caste is being reformed, focused on exploration rather than conquest. Earth's governments are sharing technology with Concordat scientists. It's everything my grandmother dreamed of. And us? Thomas asked softly. Where do we go from here? The stars are open to us now, Lyra replied, moving closer. All of them. No more boundaries, no more separation. She reached up to trace the scar on his temple that matched her royal markings. We could explore them together. The Starcross hummed in response to their shared emotion, its hybrid systems a testament to what humanity and the Concordat could achieve together. As Thomas drew Lyra into a kiss, their neural patterns harmonizing through the ship's interface, he felt the weight of history settling into place. Their peoples had been separated by fear, but were now being reunited by love, a force as old as the stars themselves. Above them, Earth and Concordat ships danced through space, their quantum signatures intermingling like the DNA that proved they had never truly been separate at all. A new age was dawning, one that would see humanity reach heights their ancestors in the stellar assembly had only dreamed of. And it had all begun with a chance encounter at a remote mountain lodge, where destiny had finally found its way home.